we will get to maybe not tonight. I don't know. The story of how your family today was created, but jumping forward a little bit, spoiler alert, they have 3 children.
It's been mentioned once or twice.
But how do you guys keep the memory of Baby Rod alive, like with the boys?
They know they have a sibling in heaven. They have a lot of questions around that. And we do our best to answer them truthfully. But they do sporadically, we'll just mention like, oh, Stephen, we never knew gender. Stephen has always had this gut feeling it was a boy. I think several people had a gut feeling that our baby was a boy. And so our boys talk about brother. And it's even was like natural to them. They're 3 brothers, so maybe the concept of having a sister is outside of their realm right now, but they talk about brother in heaven. And so it'll just randomly come up of like, did we know our brother in heaven? And then I'll say, no, not yet, but you will one day when you get there. We'll say things like that. I think the other thing that I used to hide and I don't anymore is the emotion around it. When Mother's Day comes around or the holidays come around, it hits me so hard. And I used to, when they were much younger, and we couldn't have as many conversations as we do at the ages they are now, I used to just sneak away and hide. I would like busy myself with laundry so I can like cry in the laundry room alone. And I don't do that as much anymore. And I'm much more open with them about my moments where I'm feeling it. Like if I'm crying, I'll tell them, oh, I'm missing our baby in heaven, or, I'm missing your Uncle Miles, or like whoever it is that I'm missing at the moment. I talk about it with them. And I think I've realized like I have to show them what it's like to feel the emotion, for them to observe it and see it. Because I used to hide away. I didn't want them to have a Christmas with mom crying, and I've just kind of learned with time to just embrace it and let them know this is what I'm feeling, and to let them comfort me, because that's immediately what happens is they all just want to love on mom. It's okay, mommy. And let them have that moment where they learn to comfort too. And so I think that's kind of like, I cried to hear, Soli talk about Sissy, because we try to give our sons that too. And I think it's really important, at least for us and for me, it's really important that they know it's still hard to help them understand. Our older 2 are adopted. Other spoiler alert, they have a lot of questions around that. And so it's even like we get these hard questions sometimes about just the nature of our family. And there's moments where I'm like, we look at each other and Steven's like, Allison, you're saying too much, stop, and he's like, they're not ready for that, and there's moments where I'm like, but I think they are. I don't know. You just do the best you can.
The funny thing is, I think what you just said applies to right now, because I don't think they were ready for you to say they were adopted yet.
Sorry. My bad.
Oh, no, you're
Marco can edit out whenever he wants to edit out.
I was going to add, though, I was just going to say, I think we normalize it. We just say, like, matter of fact, yeah, you have a lost sibling in heaven, and none of us ever got to meet them, and we'll meet them when we get there. Just that kind of narrative, and it kind of quells their curiosities enough to be like, oh, okay, and then
until it comes up again.
Yeah, but I feel like they'll eventually get to a point where they'll understand. Oh, I see what happened now. You know what I mean? And it really won't hopefully require too much more explanation.
Yeah, like age appropriate.
Yeah,
sure.
Pieces of information. I think.
Yeah. You said something and it made me think of another question, but I never know, and I'm curious to hear how you respond to this question. Like when people ask you, how many kids you have?
Oh,
it's such a hard question.
I don't even think about that twice initially, and then now in this context, just thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I can see how that would be challenging.
When people ask me that question, I answer in the way that, like, I answer in a way that's going to be simple for them and easy for them to understand,
And without needing explanation.
but it makes me feel guilty.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think that's a really important thing to talk about and for people to understand. I've assessed the situation. So like depending on who asked me, what kind of setting I'm in, have they made me feel comfortable where I can talk about that, or have they given me any inkling that that could resonate with them? Like I'm like doing so much mental gymnastics before I
Yeah.
say 3 or 4. And yeah, so I totally understand that. And often than not, I say 3 because it's usually in the context of like a professional setting and we're doing some like sidebar chit chat. And then once I've got to know somebody, even at work more, then I share a little bit more, or it just, but initially, like you said, Sissy, it's like, what's going to be most palpable for them? And that's the answer. And then I do feel that guilt to this day. I'm like, that's partial truth. And it, yeah, it makes it feel like you're dishonoring, but I know that's not really what I'm doing, you know, so I have to like talk myself through that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
But
hard.
it feels like a gut punch. Like when people ask that question, I instantly, like, any sense of like I could be super happy, it just like crushes my spirit when people ask me that, especially like when I'm with Sully too, be like, oh, is he your first? And I want to be like, no. But then I'm also like you, it's like a lot of situations aren't appropriate to like be like, no, he's not. And then there's going to be another question or something. And then it's like, so I just like when people ask me that, I just want to like run away. I'm like, I don't want to answer that question because, yeah, there's all this guilt that comes with it of like, and honestly, like I feel that same kind of guilt even in sometimes like when I'm enjoying my child too much. It's like, oh, I forgot to be sad that I have another child that's lost, you know? Like there's this weird guilt like that too, you know? I don't know if you've ever experienced that.
No, typically I don't feel the guilt, and I was just pondering, do I even pause when someone asks me, oh, is this your first? And I think my experience, and can't speak for you, Stephen, but I'd be curious to hear from you as well in this, because I didn't carry the child, because the child, I yes experienced the loss, yes I have a very clear space in my heart for this child. But when I get asked that question, it's a default for me just to say, oh, yes, he's our firstborn. And I don't think there's any logic or any reasoning behind it for me personally. But I don't quantify, I just don't dwell on it in that sense. But I think that's just my brain being wired differently.
I also think it's just like I'm also far more aware of other people's perception. I think too, like I think for you, like for me, I'm like I want to talk about it because I want you to know that there's another child for you to remember. And I think for you, you're just like I know that my child exists. That's enough for me. And like I'm not like that.
That might be what it is. I'd have to ponder it more.
Like I'm not like that.
I think I align very much with how Marco explained, you know, even in my initial feelings of the loss itself and all those things, not carrying the baby and not, you know, physically feeling it definitely, you know, led me to have a different experience. And, you know, being that we adopted kids before we had our firstborn adds a whole nother element to it too, because when they ask me if Matthew's my firstborn, I'm like,
No, he's our 4th.
yeah. And it's just like, I mean, he's my youngest. That's usually how I respond. He's my youngest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And and because my oldest, who would technically be younger than my miscarried child, or
No.
older than my
No.
miscarried child.
Yeah,
So
older, yeah.
yeah, it just makes it difficult. But I mean, usually I got 3 kids. I got 3 kids,
Yeah.
in terms of the public, I feel like that piece of me is a little bit more private. And if you're curious and you want me to talk about it, I'm more than happy to with the right people in a context like this with, people I
Yeah.
love and I'm comfortable with. And I know that they genuinely care, but to the, the people at work or the random person that I interact with, asking about my kids, yeah, that's not for them, I guess.
Allison, I want to ask you this question because I'm wondering if maybe I'm just not far enough removed from my experience, but I know for me when like the month of October rolls around and it's pregnancy and infant loss awareness month, or when Hope's birthday rolls around or whatever, I want to post on social media. And part of that is for me, but part of it is because I want other people, outside people, to know and remember. Not so they can feel bad for me, but it weirdly feels like that's how I'm also honoring my child. And I'm curious, like, did you ever feel that way? Do you still feel that way if you did? Or like, just what are your thoughts surrounding that? Because sometimes I feel like a crazy person that I feel that way.
No, I would say to you and to anyone who's hearing this, like however you feel is how you feel. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's how you feel and you're allowed to feel it. I completely resonate with that. That's a lot of how I process. That's a lot of how I honored. That's a lot of how I was, it was like my motherly way of making sure the world didn't forget and knew my baby existed and is still loved. So I completely understand that. Um, I think with time, it's it's 2017, it's been 7 years.
7 years.
Um, I want to say this was the first year when May rolled around that I didn't post anything publicly.
Mm.
I'm almost certain. I'm almost certain this was the first year. I remember writing something privately in my journal, but I didn't for the first time post publicly. And I felt a peace about that. And I'm not sure what changed or shifted, or why that was the case for me personally, but I remember writing privately this year versus publicly. Early on in the early years, I was very hurt by people that loved me but seemingly forgot.
Mm.
They didn't remember the anniversary. They didn't, you know, do the reach out on Mother's Day. Um, and because the experience was not visceral to them, they didn't connect to it. That used to hurt me a lot, a
Yeah.
lot, a lot. And it, with time that has eased as well. What I realize is that those who know the pain never forget their own or those who love them. So, my sister has had 2 miscarriages, and between her and I sometimes I feel like maybe I'm the only one who messages her on those anniversary dates, and she's definitely one of the ones who messages me. Um, and I think with time, I have a peace. Like it's really interesting to hear your all experience because it's like you had more of an instantaneous peace that I didn't have. And then I think with more time, I have more peace.
Mm.
Um, and what I have found in that is that it's almost like I want, like, for example, you or my sister, it's like I spend time like, hey, messaging people also in my sister's circle of like, hey, please, this is the day, reach out to her. Like, and I have the effort where I'm like wanting to make sure she is loved on those anniversary days. My niece is loved on those anniversary days. Um, Even though that's not the case for me. And I don't know, I think with time I'm okay with that. I have a peace and now I just spend my efforts like investing in that way of like, make sure
Yeah.
they're loved. Um, so but I completely understand that, Sissy, because I just it was a way, like it was a way for me to also honor, um and to keep spreading that awareness for others. Like I said, when I first shared publicly, so many people were like, this also happened to me and I never had anyone to talk about. And so like that was also very meaningful to me to keep talking about it in case there were others who didn't have people like you and I had one another to talk to, right? It just was like another way for them to still feel seen. So I think that was also part of it for me too.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like I literally post it for immediate family. Um, and I know that that would be hard for them to hear, but I post it because I feel like they won't remember if I don't remind them.
Yeah.
And
They don't.
Yeah.
it,
And it's not it's not an
no,
offense. It's
No.
not meant as an offense.
and that's where I'm hopeful that over time I won't take it as an offense, but
It's hard not to.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and that's okay, sissy. That's okay. And you get to be there for as long as you need to be there.
Yeah.
yeah,
Really. Because I 100% understand that feeling because I have felt it too.
so somebody I know, and I don't fault him for this because it's his opinion, and hearing stories about miscarriage and stuff can be really difficult because people don't know how to like interact with it. And so somebody I know recently said like that he hates when people post online about like anniversaries and stuff for things like this. And he didn't know when he said it that I was one of those people. But
You haven't shared this with me.
I haven't. But I remember telling him like, well, it's not for you, like if you don't like it, like that's fine.
Scroll on by.
I understand how it can be a little ick, like if you've never experienced it in your world. But I was like, but it's not for you,
Yeah.
But then he like was asking me questions. He was like, well, why do you think that you post it? And that was like the first time that I really was like honest with myself of like, yes, I want to honor my child. And this is one way I feel like I'm doing that. But if I'm being completely honest, I think the bigger piece of it is that I was doing it so that, parents would remember, siblings would remember, like the people in my immediate circle would remember. One, so that my child can be remembered. And two, like, check on us strong ones over here holding crap together. We're not okay today,
Amen, sister.
So
I feel like that ties into our mental health conversation we just had last month with Emily a little bit, just about how important it is to just be present with people.
Yeah. To kind of wrap things up, obviously we just talked a lot about very serious things and all of that. And so something that I always like to be sure we do is talk about some of the practical pieces. So we've kind of sprinkled those throughout between our perspective, Allison and Steven's perspective, but to just kind of wrap it up in a pretty little bow for anybody watching, what would you guys say are like some key things that loved ones, friends, family can do to like come alongside people who are going through like suffering through a miscarriage or just the aftermath of it? And then also along with that, what other kind of practical things did you do to kind of process through? Or were there any resources that you used to kind of help you in your grief journey?
I think just on a simple point, the acknowledgement of it, of the loss from family members and loved ones is very important, and the memory of it, keeping the memory alive, and those are kind of the things that I feel like really help to deal with it. And then I mean, in terms of the things that you actually did to move on, I feel like you have to kind of highlight those.
Yeah, I would say, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, is I know this could be delicate, but trying to get a sense of, is this someone who wants to continue talking about this, or is this someone who does not? And trying to understand that. I think the tips that I have are more for the person who wants to continue talking about this, because that's the experience I had. super practical thing I've done, because sadly I know many people in my family who've experienced this after I did, is literally plugging things in my calendar. Like just like I would any other date. It is on my calendar so that I don't lose sight of it. Um, so I've done that. In the immediate week after, I stayed home, and everyone in my world had to go back to work. Life went on for everyone. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting there when my whole world had ended, and life just goes on around you. And something incredibly practical that somebody did for me was your brother actually, my brother-in-law brought me food. He was the one that was local and was not working and had flexibility, and he literally brought me food because I couldn't even be a person. And not only did he bring it, he like made me eat some of it. And like was like, take a bite, you know? And I was like, I don't want to eat. And he was like, take a bite. Um, and so, you know, like while he was at work and my mother-in-law's at work, like that is something, and he didn't stay long. He literally just saw me eat a few bites. Was like, okay, I'm gonna go now. Um, that helped because like I said, I was so terrible about like taking care of my physical health,
Mm.
my sleep, my everything.
Yeah.
Um, so that was really helpful. So if you can find a way to like send somebody food or bring them food, or if you know they have like a comfort food and you're local and can make and bring it, I mean, those gestures go a
Yeah.
long way, I
Hmm.
think. Um,
You know, something that just came to mind too was people who would reach out and would just say, you know, I'm thinking about you, you
mhm.
know, and that's it. Because I think something that would occasionally become frustrating is, you know, what can I do for you? What can, and we find ourselves like, we don't
Yeah.
really, there's nothing you can do, you know what I mean? We
Yeah.
just, you know, just the recognition is,
Huge,
yeah, yeah.
huge. Yeah, so I would say practical number one, plug in meaningful dates in your calendar for the people you care about so you do not lose sight of them. Practical number two is to either send them food or bring them food if you can, and if that is something you think they might receive well. In my particular case, I needed that.
Mm.
Um, and then for me personally, um, I did not go to therapy. I probably should have, with
Mm.
how long and how devastating it was for me in the months and months and months after. I probably should have. Um, so I would recommend that to anybody who experiences this moving forward. Um, I wrote a lot. I processed a lot through writing. I shared some of it publicly and some of it I did not. And so that was very therapeutic for me, was to just express myself in some way, get my feelings out in some way. Um, the other practical thing I would say, especially to loved ones, is um, this was very hard for me. I skipped a lot of family gatherings in that like
Mm.
6 to 8 months. I skipped gender reveals. I cut out early on Thanksgiving and Christmases and just different things that were very hard for me. And um, you know, I don't know that all family members understood, and that's okay. Um, but I was honest with them as to why I was not going to certain things. Like, I'm just not emotionally ready to go to the gender reveal. I'm not emotionally ready
Hmm.
to go to the baby shower. And so I had to shift my perspective because I'm such a family oriented person, and I am a elder sister who has
Hmm.
invested a lot of my time and love into my younger sisters. And so that personally was very hard for me to not attend a very important milestone in their own life. And I had to reconcile that with like, in this moment, it does not mean you love them any less. It does not mean you support them any less. You just need to prioritize your mental, emotional health today. And that's what
Yeah.
it looks like today. Um, and so I had to do a lot of that. And I would encourage anyone who's going through this to do that for themselves. It's a gift you can give yourself. And I would share that with loved ones to try to be open-minded around that. Um, because there were a lot of instances in which I personally pushed myself and I shouldn't have. And I was sneaking away a lot to just cry
Mm.
and suck it up and put on my smile and go out and be daughter, wife, sister, aunt, all the things. And then it was too much for me, and the times I did push myself.
Yeah. Hearing you say some of those things, it like reminded me of so many other things that I wanted to talk about with you surrounding this topic. But I think it's stuff we can tie into the next episode and make it, we'll talk about adoption, but also just talk about creating families after
Loss.
after loss. Because I'm just remembering now so many other things that I wanted to ask you about. But I would like to get your perspective on this as well. Like, we heard from Allison and Stephen what things people could, do, or practical tools and things. Like, what do you feel like from your perspective would have been helpful, or
what was helpful and what could have been helpful? For me, it was interesting because I was able to relate to some of my coworkers in ways I've never had before. When I opened up and I said, I'm not coming into work, experienced a loss. And, when they got clarity of what that was, hearing their experiences and hearing this from other men, share, this is my wife and I, we experienced this. And, we didn't necessarily hear their same level of wanting to commemorate, but recognizing that it was hard and that, just even being able to openly discuss. I was having a conversation about it probably for a good 45 minutes, like less than a month afterwards. They said this is, an incredible space for you to be in a month after because it is so hard. So having other godly men, but also other men who, just were open about their experience. Because again, it is so common, but so taboo to discuss because it's about loss. It's about death. It's about grief. It's about all the things that humans naturally tend to shy away from. And so there was that. And so that was a really positive experience that I received. What I wish would have been different or better, for people to read my mind and just come and give me a hug. I'm a physical touch person, and so the only person besides my parents, when I shared with them, or when we shared with them the name, we had chosen, and there was a lot of tears at that time and hugs. But I think you were the only person I could go to and get that hug that I just needed, that embrace of like everything's going to be okay. And again, that's just my cup of tea. I'm a person who's needs that physical reassurance. I'm a teddy bear who ran out of hugs. I'd like to describe myself as Pooh Bear, like the honey ran out. Okay, like it was desperate times.
I don't know if you remember going to Spirit West Coast, but they had like those hoodies that they would sell that said free hugs. I feel like Marco would wear one of those.
Might be a little tacky. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, I didn't, and this goes back to the episode that we just had with Emily, but even with like my mental health journey, I wasn't great at opening up and sharing about my experience. And so I needed people to read my mind. Like, no, that's not the answer. That's going to be best. But I think if anyone's listening to this and is going through this or has gone through this and you have not shared, find the people you can trust, the people that are near and dear, and then take a step of openness and trust, and that those people are going to be are going to catch you, because sharing and having that camaraderie of this crappy club, we're going to call this episode the crappy club, but having that love and acceptance for something that is so hard to put into words in a healthy manner, and then also receive love in a way that is, the way that you need. It can't be described. Like that's just the best.
Yeah.
Sorry, not really a tangible way to express it, but
no, I mean that's you, babe. That's you. You're apologizing. I think I'm definitely more like acts of service driven, where like, like a meal train is like, It's funny because I don't even remember the like weeks that followed and like what people did. I mean, I know that this bear spoke volumes to us, which was like the ultimate act of love, aside from Jesus.
Pretty close. Pretty close.
I think like what was really difficult about the timing of our loss was that it was in a very busy season for you.
Yeah, my work.
With it being around the holidays and Christmas being something that both Marco and I were so heavily involved in at the church. And I remember like silently just kind of suffering and
being invisible, no one knowing.
Yeah, like literally the week that it happened, having to be at the church every day for like rehearsals and stuff like that. Yeah. And so I can't fault anybody at the time because like we obviously weren't open about it, but I think it's just the willingness to like get down in the ick with people, even when it's uncomfy for you, because you know that that's what they need. And I think it goes back to like what you said, Stephen, like it's not even about doing anything. Like as much as I'm acts of service, it's not even about doing anything. It's just about recognizing like, hey, I know that you're in the thick of it right now. And like, I don't know what I can do for you, but like I'm here and I'm thinking about you. And it's crazy how just that goes a long way. Yeah. And so I'll always take the practical, tangible stuff like, yes, feed me because I'm not feeding myself, and bring me chocolate that I can stuff water. My face, with, and, all of those things. But it really is the like, just genuinely be there. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's so tough, right? Because I don't know, like, I didn't know how to interact with anybody who had gone through a miscarriage. Like even when you went through yours, I look back on that and I'm like, man, I did so many things wrong, or like I still feel like that sometimes. But then you go through it yourself and you're like, oh, these are all the things that you need. And so like hindsight's 20/20, but it's tough because when you haven't experienced it or you haven't been close to it, you don't know how to interact with it. But like, it's not something that like anybody needs to shy away from. It's like we talked about the statistic, like it's happening everywhere. And so the harsh reality of the situation is that even if you think you don't know anybody who's experienced it, you probably do, right? And that's a really heartbreaking fact, but that's
what was that?
What it is,
what was the number again? It was 1 in 4, 1 in 5.
1 in 4.
1 in 4. So I have a weird obsession with putting things into just very tangible number perspectives. But if you were to think of all the friends, all the people you know, just stop and think. A fourth of them were probably touched in some way, shape, or form by miscarriage.
Yeah.
Like, specifically, obviously, women who experience it. But our circles of friends, circle of people, everyone intersects. So a fourth of the people more than likely have an experience with that. And the fact that we don't discuss it is a tragedy.
Well, and I do think it is discussed more.
Sure, it probably
now,
is. I think even with parenting, and sure, I chose not to read up on all the baby literature and all that mess. But I felt more knowledge just inherent in society than a well understood perspective of what the loss and what the impact of this gamble you're taking of going on this journey of pregnancy. Mm-hmm. And the fact, we didn't even get to touch on this, but the fact that we chose to then, pretty quickly get pregnant again and then go through that.
Yeah, and this is part of why I want to continue the conversation, because there's this whole aftermath of like, both of us had pregnancies after this, and that's a whole other beast in and of itself. And so that's why I want to continue the conversation
in the next episode.
Okay. So I guess to wrap it up, like, every story is so unique. Mm-hmm. There's no one size fits all in how it all goes down and how you should support people. Like, everybody is so different. I think it really just, like, it kind of goes back to, like, our last episode, though, of, like, just be intentional with people, you know, because you don't know what people are going through. And so, like, just be genuine and be intentional with people, you know? And yeah.
So on that note,
no, we're not ending
thank
it.
you to our
Yes, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you to our beautiful guests who will be joining us again for another episode, hopefully soon. Most likely the next one after this. But I just want to say thank you to Allison and Steven. It's been a pleasure having you guys, and we'll punch in on that.
Can you laugh on cue?
And on that note,
I knew I could just ask a stupid question and I would get a laugh.
Wow, that works so easy.
I think also this whole episode is a powder keg. Like, we've just been so deeply emotional. Like, we need a release, and so
Yeah.
so there's that too.
I'm really good at that. When Marco and I are fighting, I'll be the one who's like says something snarky and stupid to just bring the
Like, diffuse the situation.
yeah. Which is
Also,
funny
That's
because
what she
I'm
does.
usually
So, you know.
yes, but I'm usually the one that, like, brings the situation up here, so I feel like I
That's true.
need to be the person too. What?
Nothing.
What are you saying over there?
Nothing.
Marco likes to do this thing where he whispers into the microphone and I don't hear it until we're editing the podcast. And then I'm like, what did you say?
You heard.
I legit didn't hear you that time. Sassy pants. Anyway, again, thank you guys so much for doing this. I love you both so much. We love you both so much. And I'm excited for the next one. And yeah, on that note,
Good afternoon
good evening.
and good night.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
We're
Thanks so much for
cringy.
joining.
Thank
we
you.
hope you like our cringy vibe.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thanks so much for joining. We hope you like our vibe. We're the honest couple. We'll see you here next time. We'll be here every month, so like and hit subscribe.